unless you have the visibility into what's going on, you can't prioritize. To me, prioritization, as well as managing of expectations, is a really important component of successful teams, especially in marketing.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there! Welcome to episode 262 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Ingresso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, my guest on this episode is Heidi Melin, CMO of Workfront. Heidi, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie. I'm thrilled to be joining you today.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited as well. And as you know, Heidi, you're not the first executive from Workfront to be on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Alex Shootman, your CEO, joined us about 20 episodes ago, episode 241 to be exact. And we discussed what was then the exciting new book, Done Right, How Tomorrow's Top Leaders Get Work Done. You're all about that at Workfront. And so today on this episode, Heidi, I have invited you here to discuss the 2020 State of Work report that Workfront has just published. So before we get into that, we're going to talk about that in the big picture as well as what it means to marketers. Let's just begin with a refresher for my listener about Workfront. Tell us a little bit about Workfront and, of course, your role there as Chief Marketing Officer.
Absolutely. So Workfront, as you alluded to, our mission is to help people do their best work. And in today's digital world, that can be sometimes challenging. And so Workfront's a modern work management platform that helps teams connect with each other, understand priorities, look at resources, and all be on the same page because work really matters today. And so providing tools that allow our customers to do work better and to do the best work that they can for their organizations is really what powers Workfront. And I have the opportunity to be the Chief Marketing Officer at Workfront, and I've been here for about a year and a half, bringing experience from other software as a service businesses. Have been in the software business almost my entire career, and excited to be working with Alex, who you've talked to before, as he and I have worked together before. We were both at Eloqua. And so really fun to be part of the Workfront team. And before joining Workfront, I actually was a Workfront customer, which is another reason why I'm passionate about the platform, because I've seen the power of it inside an organization.
You know, I've seen that several times, both here on the podcast and in general when I meet people like yourself who are in a marketing leadership role and you're a former customer. So I think that is a fantastic testament to the product. You obviously experienced it and believe greatly in it. So that's great background, great context. So let's get into it. Heidi, let's talk about the State of Work report. First of all, what is it and why do you all do it?
So the 2020 State of Work report, we're just getting ready to publish it. It comes out at the beginning of October, and we are so excited about it because this is actually the 6th year that we've done this report. The reason why we do it is because we see and interact with about 3,000 customers. And we see the observations, we sort of have that front row seat in how work is getting done in these large, global, complex companies. And so it's a really great opportunity to step back and really survey on a global basis how work is getting done in large enterprises. And this report surveyed almost 4,000 enterprise workers in the US, in the UK, in Germany, and in the Netherlands. So it truly takes a global perspective on how companies are getting work done.
Fantastic. And of course, we are going to provide a link to the report so that my listener can download it and read it. So in this year's report, State of Work report, which you said, Heidi, is in its 6th year, you mentioned as we were preparing for the podcast, you mentioned that there were really 4 key sort of takeaways, if you will. So let's talk briefly about each one of them, and then we plan to kind of dive down into one in particular. But what were the 4 fundamental attributes that you saw across the companies that were interviewed?
So the 4 themes that really came across really loud and clear this year across these global organizations and these knowledge workers, the first one was that the employees are engaged and they want to make a strategic impact to their business. So that's really great news. The second theme is a little more concerning, which is work is actually getting in the way of work. And that's probably one of the most troubling recurring themes that we've seen over the last 6 years. We also saw that technology could help, but it needs to be the right technology. And lastly, that employees do feel accountable, but they also feel like they're not always aligned. And so those are really the 4 themes. Employees are engaged, work is getting in the way of work, technology can help, but it has to be the right technology. And finally, that employees feel accountable, but not always aligned.
So obviously this is a marketing podcast, and my listener is largely a marketing leader like yourself, or working in a marketing role, or sometimes marketing and sales. Let's get into it a little bit further around work is getting in the way of actual work. Let's talk about specifically about the marketer's work week and the impact of that takeaway. What is the takeaway to the marketer when they hear from the State of Work report that people are saying that work is getting in the way of actual work?
Yeah, one of the things that has been consistent over the last 6 years that we've done this report, and this is certainly true with the marketing teams that we surveyed, is that they're only spending 40% of their work week on the job that they were actually hired to do. 40%, which means, if you do the math, 60%, they're spending on low value or work that they weren't hired to do. And that's concerning. So that's one of the things, as I said, we've seen it year after year, and it hasn't changed.
So you're saying that roughly that number hasn't changed? It's been fairly constant at around 40%?
That is correct. And that's concerning because companies are literally spending trillions of dollars on initiatives to improve productivity. How many productivity tools do we all have that we have to use?
No kidding.
And we're not gaining any ground. And so something has to change.
So what I'm hearing you say there, Heidi, is that workers are spending only 40% of their time on what they were hired to do, which means that, as you said, 60% of their time, they're doing what? I mean, what are the things, how granular does the report give you that insight on what are they doing in that 60% of their time? Because if you're a marketing leader, heck, if you're a CFO and you hear this, I mean, that's got to raise some big red flags. What's going on with that 60% then?
Absolutely. So imagine sitting down with a Fortune 50 company and sitting down with their CFO and saying, gosh, 60% of what your teams across your organization are working on, they weren't hired to do. That's concerning. That's real resources and real dollars. So some of the things that we see, especially in the marketing area, that's getting in the way of them doing the things that they were hired to do, the number one culprit is actually wasteful meetings at 62%. So wasteful meetings, people getting together, not necessarily moving projects forward, not necessarily productive meetings, but wasteful time spent in meetings.
Wow. I don't think that that's a surprise. It certainly doesn't surprise me. We have to ask why. Why are there so many wasteful meetings that are happening in the context of us trying to do marketing?
We think that one of the central drivers of wasteful meetings is poor mechanisms to align the business. So when you think of strategic alignment and planning of work and communicating status updates, I don't know about you, but a lot of my meetings throughout my career have been focused on alignment and status. And the meeting time where you're actually sitting down together is not being used for strategic purposes. It's being used for really alignment purposes and ensuring that everyone knows the status of a specific project or initiative. And so that's where the main part of Wasteful meetings comes from. And there's certainly other drivers, Bernie, things like excessive emails, lots and lots of emails, inability to prioritize. But Wasteful meetings is really the key culprit that we see from the survey.
So you've already moved to the other one that I think my listener probably was expecting. That is email, right? Excessive emails. So you're seeing that. Did you mention oversight? That's another culprit as well?
Yeah, it certainly is. Excessive oversight. So the manager, the leader that's drilling down to a level of detail and taking up time away from a knowledge worker. And that excessive oversight is something we see, as well as poor prioritization. Prioritization is a hard thing to do in organizations, and sometimes not everyone has the right visibility into what's going on to be able to prioritize appropriately.
If 40% of the workforce, and of course we're talking here in the context of marketing, but if 40% of the workforce is doing what they were hired to do, and we've got the culprits of wasteful meetings and excessive emails and excessive oversight, let's talk about some things that marketers can do, marketing leaders can do specifically to improve their state of work. Where would you like to begin, Heidi?
I think one of the first places to begin is to look at how work is treated inside an organization. Many times work is distributed amongst many tools, whether it's in email, whether it's in PowerPoint, whether it's in Slack or Jira. Work is spread out across so many different, what I'm going to call productivity tools. And it's not aligned with the content and the objectives of the work. And so we as knowledge workers have to figure that part out on our own. We have to find the content. We have to search for it. We have to find that string of emails. How many times have you had to go back to say,
oh my goodness.
I have to find this project. What if you could connect the collaboration as well as the content in the same place? I think of it as treating work as a tier one asset in an organization. And you think of a marketing team, and the work that a marketing team does is your product. And yet we treat people and data about people as a tier one asset in a company. We have an HR system. It's going to be a Workday or an Oracle system, for example. You treat the financial data, the budget, the accounting as tier one data in a finance system, whether that be NetSuite or Oracle or SAP. Those are all tier one assets. We even treat our customer data as a tier one asset, like in your CRM system, likely Salesforce or some other tool. But we don't treat work as a tier one asset. And one of the things that we see with our customers as they look at really centralizing, providing visibility to the work going on within the marketing team, that helps them reduce the number of wasteful meetings because everyone can see what's going on. And so that's really where Workfront plays a key role and certainly should help with employees getting more time to spend on that high value work, especially on the marketing side.
Where my brain goes with that to translate it into like a nice soundbite, Heidi, is it's around goal setting, right? Are you saying that basically let's make sure we've got the right goals in place so that everyone on a project understands what we're working on way down in the weeds is right, or maybe we've taken a tangent and we need to revisit it?
Absolutely. Improved goal setting is one way that marketing leaders can help improve the state of work for their team members, and ensuring that everyone has access and visibility into those goals. Absolutely first step. I would also say breaking into smaller teams is something we see as being able to move the ball forward more quickly. You talked with Alex Shootman about the Done Right book. One of the reasons and the core initiatives behind writing that book is to help teams move things forward in today's digital age. And breaking into smaller teams and operating in a smaller environment, even in a large organization, can help improve how marketing teams move forward.
I'm thinking about that one, Heidi. Smaller teams sounds good. How easy is that for marketers to do in the age of complexity, where you need a data analyst, you need a designer, you need a project manager, you need someone who's going to manage the CRM side, and you need a creative person to put the whole campaign together, and before you know it, you got 7 or 8 people on a team.
And then that's where increased specialization comes in. Really ensuring that the right job is going to the right person with the right skill set. And that's really a change, Bernie, that I've seen with marketing teams over the course of my career, where a number of years ago, marketing was filled with many generalists. And over time, we've really had a strong need to increase specialization. Some of those special skills that you highlighted, data scientists, for example, who would have imagined a number of years ago that that type of specialization would be needed, but it's critical.
Would be needed in marketing. I mean, needed in the business, yes, but needed in marketing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and today that's one of the most critical roles, because understanding your targeting and customer data and all of the insights that can be gleaned from the data that we're collecting, like having that specialization actually helps improve the state of work and helping marketing teams move things forward.
Makes sense. And I'm totally bought into that. I'll be back in a moment with the rest of my conversation with Heidi Melin. On this episode, you're hearing about the 2020 State of Work report from Workfront. Well, I want to tell you about a report from Vengresso that maybe you heard about on a previous episode. It's our State of Digital Selling LinkedIn 2019 report. Now, in this report, we surveyed 862 B2B sales reps across 5 industries to measure their digital selling skills. The results? Well, despite the digital age that we live and work in, we learned that most sales professionals lack the fundamental skills to find, engage, and connect on LinkedIn with the people that they need to meet to start more sales conversations. For example, 59% of the reps that we surveyed have not added any media to their LinkedIn profile. That's a missed opportunity to offer content that demonstrates that the rep understands their buyer's needs and has solutions for them. The State of Digital Selling report offers 10 key findings, along with commentary from 15 executives on how to address these findings. You can get the State of Digital Selling LinkedIn 2019 report at stateofdigitalselling.com. All one word. Now, when you download this report, we're also going to invite you to participate in our survey for the 2020 State of Digital Selling report. So get the report, and if you or your sales team want to participate in our 2020 survey, again, just go to stateofdigitalselling.com. What else can marketers do to improve their state of work?
Certainly setting time limits. And marketing tends to be one of those areas that involves a lot of creativity and a lot of new ideas and innovation. And that doesn't necessarily cleanly line up to time limits and time frames and dates that you need to meet. And so setting time limits, we're going to move forward at this point actually helps drive teams to make more progress instead of continuing to iterate, continuing to brainstorm, continuing to work on things that are more creative and innovative in nature. And so setting some time limits so that we know when the team has to move forward, having a clear understanding of how we need to work against deadlines and have everyone have access to that.
So there's the other extreme. You're saying here, Heidi, that a marketer should set some time limits, but then the flip side to that is, what if expectations are coming from, say, an executive who says, we really need this in 90 days, and then the team is saying, we really need 4 months, 5 months to really do this. So instead of setting time limits, you're actually being asked to do it in a faster period of time. How does that come into play?
Yeah, so I think that's when there needs to be some prioritization process that goes into place. So when we think about one of the things that gets in the way of high value work is poor work prioritization. The scenario that you just described, an executive team says this needs to be done in 15 minutes and it really takes 15 days to get it done. Really being able to prioritize, having visibility into all the projects that are going on and being able to prioritize and manage expectations in both directions. And unless you have the visibility into what's going on, you can't prioritize. To me, prioritization, as well as managing of expectations, is a really important component of successful teams, especially in marketing.
What about the role of the workforce itself? As we discussed recently before we pressed record, there's a big element of the workforce, especially in marketing, but not limited to marketing, but certainly in marketing, that's remote, virtual. How does that impact the state of work and getting work done?
Yeah, it certainly creates more complexity because we all have different tools that we're using, and workforces are increasingly remote. So teams are having to work across geographic boundaries more today than ever before. And so ensuring the right technology is in place to ensure that communication can be seamless. That includes tools that we have today, but connecting those tools together becomes really, really important. So I was describing a situation to you where I am a remote team member and I leverage Zoom, I leverage Slack, and I leverage Workfront to gain visibility because we all are seeing the same thing. And so ensuring, like we found in one of the main themes from the state of work, ensuring that you have the technology, but not just having technology, but having the right technology that enables teams to collaborate across geographic boundaries is really critical today, much more so than it was years ago.
And it also calls for good management skills too, because the technology can be misused in a way that actually can be counterproductive. You can spend 2 hours in a Zoom call that should have been done in 1 hour, or you could have 10 people on a Zoom call that should have only had 4 people. So all the other things that you were discussing earlier come into play when dealing with a remote workforce.
It's an additional complexity. And that's why work is hard today, because we have so many technologies, because it is increasingly global. It's because we do increasingly have more remote workers. And so arming tomorrow's leaders with the skills that they need to navigate in today's digital world is really what Workfront is focused on. And helping to improve and help companies and people do their best work is our mission.
Heidi, we're at a point in the podcast where I am going to do a brief recap of what we discussed. And then I will ask you to elaborate and comment on anything. Then we'll get some links and some contact information on where people can connect with you, get the report, learn more about the book, etc. And then we'll bring it to a wrap.
Sounds great.
So we opened up with a brief introduction or reintroduction to your company, Workfront, because again, Alex Shootman was our first Workfront executive on the podcast back on episode 241. And I love your description of the company. You're all about helping people do their best work, do work better, have everybody be on the same page. You are the CMO there. You've been there for, you say, about a year and a half, and your whole career, or most of your career, you say, has been in the software industry. In fact, you and Alex worked together at Eloqua. And I love the fact that you were a previous Workfront customer. So when Alex brought you in, you already had that experience. That's fantastic. So we talked about the State of Work report. It's in your 6th year, gives you the opportunity to reach out to about 3,000 customers. You've got that front row seat, as you point out, and you surveyed them across different continents, US, UK, Netherlands, and basically you're able to understand what's the state of work. And you've identified 4 kind of major themes in the 6th annual State of Work. And that is, number 1, employees are engaged and they want to make a strategic impact to the business. Work is getting in the way of actual work. That's number 2. That's what we drill down on. And then technology is good. It can help, but only when it's the right technology. And then the 4th one is that employees feel accountable, but they're not always aligned. So the one that we really drill down on is work's getting in the way of work. And you said, Heidi, that over the past 6 years, one common statistic or metric is that average workers are spending just 40% of their work week on the actual job they were hired to do. Despite the fact, as you pointed out, that companies are spending trillions of dollars, yes, trillions with a T. And we actually have an article that you pointed us to from ZDNet. We'll link that up. That shows that there's going to be, I think, $2 trillion spent by 2022 on digital transformation. So companies are spending trillions of dollars. And despite that, only 40% of our time is spent doing the job we were hired to do. And the number one culprit is wasteful meetings. It's 62%. And when we drill down on that, you said that there are many drivers behind that. One of them is just poor mechanism for strategic alignment and work planning. Excessive emails really came in at number 1 at 53%, excessive oversight, and also poor prioritization of work. So when we look at what can we do, what can marketers do to improve their state of work, you said, hey, let's look at first how work is distributed across the organization. We've got to be able to spread it out across different tools and time zones and make sure that everything is aligned with objectives and then all the content that's needed to do our jobs on a day-to-day basis. You mentioned that in other parts of the business, we're already doing that through technology. Finance has a finance system. Sales has a CRM system. Either manufacturing or distribution or whatever has a resource planning system. But, we've got to treat work as a tier 1 asset. So we need a system for that. And of course, that's the business that you're in at Workfront. So as we drill down into how can marketers improve, you said, well, number 1, let's focus on goal setting, improve goal setting so that everyone understands what the priorities are, provide access and visibility to everything that's needed. Number 2, you said smaller teams so that people can move the ball forward more quickly, increase specialization, assigning the right job to the right skill set, setting time limits so that the team can work on projects within a realistic and reasonable period of time. And then also managing the workforce. We talked about the fact that workforces now are largely remote in different time zones. And so we need to be able to manage communication tools and connect people together and be able to collaborate together. And then a closing point that you made, and I'm going to put a big exclamation point on this one, Heidi, and that is that work is harder than it's ever been before. It's more complex than it's ever been before. So everything that we discussed here today and what's covered in the 6th annual State of Work report from Workfront really sheds a lot of light into the situation for all aspects of the business, and in particular, as we discuss here today, for the marketer. So I'm going to leave my summary at that. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I would just challenge marketers to really think about the way they work. And I think today's digital age requires people and organizations to work differently and to modernize how we equip our teams to get work done. And we certainly see the pain points through the State of Work report and have seen that for a number of years. And we know that there is room for organizations, especially marketing teams, to get work done better. And part of the book, Done Right, that you talked to Alex Shootman about, episode 241, I think, Done Right is essentially a very pragmatic guide that is designed for tomorrow's leaders to keep up in today's digital world with work. And because of all these changes. And so I encourage folks to get their hands on Done Right, as well as to review the data in the State of Work report, because it's fascinating to see the changes and also the things that haven't changed.
Absolutely. This is a report that I think anybody who's a knowledge worker at any level can read and really gets value from it. You should have an audience of millions and millions of people to read this report. And I am happy to be sharing it on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. So Heidi, where can we send our listener to get a copy of the report, the book, and connect with you online?
Absolutely. If you go to workfront.com/stateofwork, you can get a copy of the report. I would also encourage, for those of you who are interested in the Done Right book, you can go to donerightbook.com and get more information about the book. And then I love to have people connect with me on Twitter. My handle is at Heidi Melin, no space, on Twitter, and also on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching Heidi Melin. So I encourage people to connect with me and have a dialogue.
Fantastic. And Heidi, I always encourage my listener that when they reach out to connect with you, to make sure that they personalize that invitation. Of course, at Vengresso, we're all about that digital engagement. And just let Heidi know that you heard her on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. You were inspired by the conversation and would love to connect with Heidi. And Heidi, of course, my listener knows that we will link up everything you just mentioned, all the links in our show notes page at vengresso.com. And on that note, Heidi, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast to talk about the state of work.
Thanks, Bernie. Thrilled to have been part of it.
Get the Vengresso State of Digital Selling with LinkedIn 2019 report to learn how sales professionals stack up on basic modern selling skills. You'll hear from 15 executives with their insights and key recommendations. And you'll also learn how you can arrange to get your own custom digital selling benchmark report for your sales team. To get the report, just go to stateofdigitalselling.com.
This wraps up another inspiring episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you want to share this podcast with a friend, let them know that we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we love 5-star reviews. If you are not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. You can read the show notes for each episode at vengresso.com. While you're there, sign up to receive the show notes delivered to your inbox through our weekly alerts. And be sure to also check out our Selling with Social podcast hosted by Vengresso CEO Mario Martinez Jr. Again, you'll find our show notes at vengresso.com. And that's one S in Vengresso. Tune in again next week when Bernie Borges brings you another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.